Hello viewers, welcome back to the channel and welcome to part 2 of the restoration of a Commodore Amiga A500. So hopefully you've seen part 1 where I unboxed 3 Commodore Amigas. These came from a friend of mine. His dad had treasured them for many years, but unfortunately they've been up in his attic. It appears as though he had 3 machines. There was an A500 and 2 A500 Plus machines. I was given all 3 of them to see if we could restore at least one of them into a working condition. The priority really was on his original machine, which is this A500. This is the one that he owned first and is the one he treasures the most and would like to see it back and working again. So in this video we're going to look at all the things that I've done to restore the machine back into the condition you see it here, which is all fully restored and working perfectly. With its original power supply, we've got an RF modulator, the original tank mouse and the main system. I'd like to thank my patrons who continue to support this channel and allow me to do things like this restoration that you're about to see. If you want to be a patron yourself, then there will be links in the video description down below. So sit back and I hope you enjoy. Hello viewers, welcome to part 2. So we're going to continue with our little exploration into these 3 Commodore Amigas and see if we can get them working. Now in the last video you would have seen I checked one of the power supplies and that wasn't working. That is one of the switching type. I also have one of these which is the heavy type, which is slightly different construction. I've not been in this one but I have tested it and it is working. So this older power supply probably goes with the original A500, not the Plus models that we've got here, which is what this power supply is for. So what I've done, I've removed all the capacitors out of this one, ordered new ones. I've also ordered new caps for all of the Amigas as well. So while I'm waiting for those to turn up, I'm just going to put this one to one side. And what I'm going to do, because we have the working power supply for this, I'm going to clean up this board, put new caps on it, put it back together. Right, so we need to put the power supply to one side. Now what I'm going to do is remove all the capacitors from this and give it a really good clean. So I'm going to have to separate it from the shielding. Okay, we have all the capacitors now removed. So I'm going to go around with this with the solder wick, get all the excess solder off, and then give it a clean. Okay, so I've just given the board a really good clean. I've tidied up all the old capacitor holes, sucked the solder out, cleaned the flux off, cleaned the whole board. It's looking really good. I've only found one issue, and that is there's one pin broken off here. In one of the joystick port, I think that is. Yeah, one of the pins is broken off, so I might have to change that port, which is a bit of a shame. But it'll be a little bit awkward, but it shouldn't be that hard. So this is all ready now to have new caps put in. I've got a nice selection of new Nichicons here to go in, so I'm going to do that next. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my channel sponsor, PCBWay, who continue to help support us. If you're an electronics hobbyist and need to make your own PCBs, I can highly recommend you go and check out their website and all the options they have for making your own PCBs. Even if you're not ready to design your own, they have an extensive range of community design project PCBs, so check those out. So links to their website will be in the video description. Go and check them out. Right, so I've spent a little bit of time resoldering in all those new caps, so we are pretty much ready to go to power this up. At the same time, I also recapped the switching power supply for the A500 Pluses. I was going to use that on this board to test it, but it still doesn't work, so there's definitely something else wrong with that. So we're going to have a look at that in another video. So in the meantime, I am going to use the original A500 power supply, which is one of the heavy ones. I've tested that, it does work. So I'm just going to move these bits out of the way. I'll set this up and we'll plug it in and we'll see what happens. Right, I have this all set up. There's literally only two connections. I've got the power coming in and the composite video connection, which is only black and white, so we won't get any colour. But it was just good quick test to see where we're at. So let's just turn this on. Yay! Right, that is a very good sign. Next step, plug the floppy drive in and see if the floppy drive works. Okay, I've been and rummaged through the box. I've found what I think is the original floppy drive for this A500, slightly larger size than the other one that I've got, so I suspect this is probably the older one that goes with the older A500. So I've just got that connected up. Just got that resting here. Now I've been sent some floppy disks from Keith at the Digital Orphanage. Thank you very much, Keith, for sending those in. Keith has his own YouTube channel and a really cool Twitter account. Does lots of vintage computer restorations, especially Amiga stuff. So if you're interested in that, I'll bob a link to his Twitter and his YouTube and all that sort of stuff, so you can go and check him out. So he sent me an Amiga extras disc, not sure what's on that, test kit, which I think is some diagnostics utility, and we've got a workbench disc, because I wasn't able to create these myself without some additional hardware. It's not something you can do just by making a disk image on a PC, so he's kindly made these on his Amiga. So let's grab the workbench disc and we'll see what happens when we power this on with the floppy drive in. And I suppose I should also connect up the mouse. Now this I've already cleaned up, but I've not tested it, so let's plug this in and see what we get. Right, let's turn this on. Oh, it's looking good. Does the mouse work? Oh, the mouse is working. Excellent.
One eternity later.
And there we go. So, do the mouse buttons work? Oh, one does. Oh, and the other mouse button works as well. I don't know what I'm doing with this. Right, so that is all really excellent news. It boots, the floppy drive works. It's probably going to need a clean, so I might take the cover off that and give that a quick service while we're here. The next thing to do is the keyboard. So it's not in great condition, this. I would like to keep this original keyboard with the older original A500, just to keep it complete, really. So what I'm thinking is I've just pulled this off one of the other keyboards I had, one of the 500 pluses, and I think that can go in there to replace the space bar. The number 5 key can swap over back onto the number pad, but we're going to need one of the plungers because that is actually missing out of there. Right, so that is all the keyboard in pieces. The membrane was actually stuck to the metal backing plate. It looks like something might have been spilt in here at some point, and that's why it's stuck down. So it's probably a drink or something that somebody dropped in there. So everything's going to need a clean. Just going to take quite a bit of time, so I'll see you in a moment. Right, I have everything cleaned up and it's come up pretty nice. So that's the top plastic piece. We've got the bottom base plate with the interface circuit on, and all the key plungers and springs, and all the keys. Now these have all been cleaned. They've come up pretty well. They are a bit yellow really, but I don't have facilities for doing retro brighting, I'm afraid, so they will stay as they are, just nice and clean. Now, as far as the membrane is concerned, I have just done a quick test of this off camera, and there are some faults on it, unfortunately. I think there's 3 breaks in 3 separate traces. It's probably on one of these links here, which I'll show you that. These are put on over the top to jump across tracks, and I suspect these have probably failed, so there's some lack of continuity between after these points and the connector. So I don't really want to repair this. I've tried to do membrane repairs before. They have worked, but they're an absolute pain to get working, and often they're not very reliable long term anyway. So what I have done is decided to go off and buy a replacement membrane. So this arrived the other day. This came from RWAP software and cost a total of £29.76 including the delivery. Links to this seller will be in the video description if you need one of these. So that is all the plungers back in. I've had to use 2 off one of the A500 Plus keyboards. Obviously we were missing one anyway from that number 5 keypad key, which is now moved here onto the space bar, so that one's a different colour. And I noticed as well when I was reinserting these, one of the original ones was actually slightly broken, so I've just used another one there for the enter key. Now it's worth noting before I put the screws back in that there are 3 longer screws than the rest of the board. So the circuit board is actually held in here with 4 screws. One of them is easy to spot because it has a washer on it already, but there are 3 of them which are slightly longer, just to account for the extra thickness on the PCB. So always worth making sure you keep those 4 screws for the PCB separate from the rest of it. Now, one of the things I did notice when I was cleaning the motherboard was, if you look here on this port here, there is one of the pins has actually been broken. So I don't really want to leave it like that. So what I've done is extracted off one of the sockets off the 500 plus boards. It's the worst condition one. I'm probably just going to use it for parts because I've actually had to use other parts from the keyboard to repair the keyboard on this, as you saw. So given I am using one of the A500 plus machines as a bit of a donor for this one, I've extracted off the socket off that one, so it's going to be completely identical to the one that's on here. So we just need to remove that one off and replace it with the new old one. Right, so I've put a load of flux on. I'm going to go through and resolder every single point on this socket, because that is going to make it a lot easier when we come to use the desoldering gun. It adds extra solder on, so it makes better contact with the desoldering gun, and it sort of freshens up the solder. It makes it much easier to work with. So let's just go through and just okay, so just let this cool down a little bit. It should be free enough to pull out. Right, first things first, we need to reassemble the circuit board into the metal shielding. Now what I have done is actually, I tried to clean up what we had, but the only way to get it really back to the way it was would be to have it replated. It's probably nickel plated steel, this, so what I decided to do as an alternative is I just sprayed it. So I've just sprayed this up in grey primer, nothing special, but it puts a nice finish on it, stops it rusting anymore, and just makes it look a little bit nicer. So let's just get this reassembled. And now we can reassemble this into the cleaned up case. It's come up really nicely, although it is still a little bit yellow, but there we are. Now while we're here, we're going to install this RAM expansion, which if you remember, we found in the box of bits. So I'm pretty certain this was used with this machine. So that's just going to plug in down here. Just need to access it from the bottom. And next to go in is the keyboard. Right, that is the Amiga all back together and it looks splendid. Yes, I wish I could have retro-brighted this, but I just don't have facilities to do that, unfortunately. But at least it's all nice, clean, tidy and restored back to a working condition. The mouse, I've cleaned this up fully. I've had the whole thing apart. It's all been cleaned and serviced. I've also replaced the Teflon pads on the bottom there because one of them was missing, so I've replaced both with some new ones. Now, these weren't off the shelf. I literally just bought a rectangular piece of the pad material and just cut them out to fit, but that's worked really well. That works nicely. The RF modulator, I've not actually tested this, but I very much doubt that its owner will be using it. I have an RGB SCART cable on order, and he's going to be using that with a nice big old CRT, so I doubt this is going to get used. Now, the power supply, obviously this being one of the early ones, the screw holes are all plugged up with plastic, so the only way to get inside this is to drill those out. Now, it seems a bit destructive, really, considering this is actually working. So what I opted to do is just leave it as it is, clean up the outsides. I've also cleaned up all the wire as well to get all that nasty, horrible gunk that gets covered on old cables. So that's all been cleaned up. I guess at some point it might need a recap, but until that point, I think it's probably best just to leave it as it is. So I guess what we should do is connect all this up, power it up and make sure it does still work and everything's fine. Right, I've got all this ready set up to do a test. I'm actually using the modulator to give me a colour composite video signal. I'm not going to bother with RGB, I just need to do a quick test, but it's also a good way to test that works. So I'm about to turn this on. I've got an Amiga Workbench disk. We'll switch it on. Excellent. Excellent, that's all booted up and it looks like we have the extra memory as well. Right, I think that pretty much concludes the video. I hope you enjoyed watching the restoration of this wonderful old machine. And this is now going to be passed back to its original owner so they can enjoy it another time around. Now, when I agreed to actually go through and actually restore this machine, we came to an arrangement where the other two machines would be used for either parts or to be sold on to pay for the restoration of this machine. Now, as it stands, we have a pretty good looking A500 Plus motherboard, which is a prime candidate for being restored, just like this one. There is also another one which has gone a little bit green, as you saw in part 1 of this video. That will probably be used as a parts bin to get the other one up and running. Now, those machines will feature in a future video, so keep an eye out for that. So thank you very much for watching, thanks for all the support, and I will see you on a future video. Bye for now.